You seem to have come into a considerable sum, around $500 million, right? Now, everyone's excited and already making big plans. You're designing a luxurious home, and I hear there's even a dream kitchen in the works. Your mother-in-law sounds absolutely enchanted by the idea. Meanwhile, your husband has decided to leave his job to start a business using what he believes is Cheryl's inheritance. But hold on a minute. Cheryl hasn't actually received any inheritance yet. You're contemplating quitting your job and diving into construction, but something doesn't add up. Why rush into these projects without any actual funds? It's quite clear you've come into some money, but let's consider a family vacation before we dive headfirst into building a house. How does a trip to Hawaii sound? As suggested by your father-in-law, adding another layer of complexity to the mix. It's as if they're planning to use the money you inherited from your mother for whatever they desire. The thought of it is infuriating. You're incredibly upset, yet unsure of how to handle the situation. Let's rewind to a few months ago to understand better how things unfolded. My name is Cheryl, and I'm a 36-year-old high school teacher. My husband, Jerry, who is 1 year my senior, works in an office. We've been married for 8 years, and shortly after we said our vows, our daughter Sarah was born. Life since then has been a hectic mix of work and family responsibilities. Today, we're planning to visit the hospital to see my mother. "Hey, Grandma, it's been a while," Sarah says as we arrive. My mom greets her with a gentle smile and runs her fingers through Sarah's hair. I notice she looks frailer, and her once vibrant face now seems a bit subdued. There's a man in a suit standing beside her bed. He gives me a nod when our eyes meet and then quietly exits the room. "Mom, who was that?" I ask, curiosity piqued. "Oh, just someone I know, nothing to worry about," she reassures me, her voice calm. She then turns her attention to us. "How have you been, Cheryl? And how's Jerry doing?" Her soft blue eyes sparkle as she smiles, reminding me of the strength she's always shown. She met my dad while he was working overseas in the import-export business. Moving to Canada to marry him, she embarked on the challenging journey of raising a child in a new country. Despite the difficulties, they managed it together, a testament to their resilience and love. Growing up, my mom was my biggest teacher, instilling in me the values and knowledge that now enable me to be a teacher myself. I'm deeply grateful for the loving and supportive upbringing my parents provided. Sadly, my father passed away a few years ago, and since then it's just been my mom, coping with her health issues and frequent hospital stays. She eventually passed on the family business to a relative and now spends most of her days in the quiet of the hospital room. "I'm doing well, Mom. Is there anything you need?" I ask during one of our visits. "Just having you and Sarah here is more than enough," she replies with a smile that warms my heart. After a bit of catching up, Sarah, who's 7 and at that challenging age of growing independence, eagerly shares updates about school and the latest book she's read. I'm proud of how she's developing. Even without my biased mom goggles, I see her as a bright and honest child. When Sarah and I return home, Jerry greets us with, "Hey, welcome back. How's my mom doing?" "Same as always," I respond, and then inquire about his day. "How was your seminar? I heard it was a good one." Lately, Jerry's been attending seminars on quitting his job to start a side hustle. It seems he's chasing after more money, even though we're managing fine with my teacher's salary. I'm not too thrilled about his growing obsession with financial gains, which I suspect he picked up from his parents. They've always been rather frugal, often asking us for small loans and rarely indulging in giving gifts, even for occasions like Christmas. Thankfully, they live far enough away that our interactions are limited. Despite this, Jerry is helpful around the house, which makes things manageable. I find solace in our simple life with my mom, Jerry, and Sarah. Then, one day, a call from the hospital changed everything. Mom's health had suddenly deteriorated, and she was in critical condition. We rushed to be by her side. With her last bit of strength, she looked at me and said, "Cheryl, I've always wanted you to be happy. Take care of Sarah." Her words echoed in my mind as we faced the reality of her fragile state. "She means everything. I love you." Those were her final words. My mom, who had devoted her life to raising me and had adored Sarah more than anything, left us with these tender words. At her funeral, seeing her serene expression, all I could manage were tears, and Sarah, standing by my side, cried alongside me. Sometime after Mom passed away, an envelope from a law firm arrived, marked with an unfamiliar return address. Inside, to my astonishment, was my mother's will, which left everything to me. Mom and I had never discussed the topic of inheritance, so the contents of the will came as a complete surprise. Holding the letter, I decided it was best to visit the law firm on my own to understand the details. Upon arriving, I was greeted by Mr. Roy, the attorney. "Hi, I'm Mr. Roy," he introduced himself. He wore glasses, the same man who had been in the hospital room when I visited my mom. "You were there when I visited my mom," I stated, recognizing him immediately. "Yes, we met briefly," Mr. Roy confirmed. "Your mom entrusted me with something very important," he added softly, his words almost bringing me to tears again. $500 million, I blurted out in shock upon hearing the figure he mentioned. "Yes, Cheryl. When your dad passed, you let your mom handle all the inheritance. Now, with what she's saved and what she's left you after taxes, that's the sum," Mr. Roy explained. I was aware my parents had been well off, but I had never involved myself with their financial matters or asked for money after getting married. "It's overwhelming," I admitted, feeling slightly dizzy from the revelation. "But I see it as a sign of love from my mom." "I'll leave it in your hands, Mr. Roy. My mom cared about you deeply, and she asked me to assist you if needed. Feel free to talk to me about anything," Mr. Roy offered kindly. "Thank you, I really appreciate it," I responded, nodding to Mr. Roy before leaving the room. As the 50th day memorial of my mother approached, Jerry, my husband, began to mention my mother's inheritance frequently. He knew they had been wealthy when we married, but his constant probing became increasingly uncomfortable, especially during my mourning period. Whenever I asked him to drop the subject, he would oblige, only to subtly bring it up again later. His persistence felt intrusive and out of place as I tried to navigate my grief. At her mother's memorial, the atmosphere was already emotionally charged when Cheryl's in-laws added another layer of complexity. Her father-in-law approached her with an offer. "Cheryl, if you're worried about handling the inheritance, we're here to help. We've been through our inheritance disputes. They can get pretty complicated, especially with unmarried siblings involved." Her mother-in-law joined in, eager to assist. "We're here for you, Cheryl." Despite their offers, Cheryl felt uneasy about involving them, as she had never relied on them in financial matters before. She managed only a vague response as they seemed to assume she needed their help. 2 months after her mother's passing, Jerry broke his silence on the matter. His sudden inquiry, "Have you gotten your mom's inheritance yet?" sent a chill through Cheryl. She hesitated before replying, "Not yet, it's a complicated process." But Jerry, seemingly frustrated, quickly ended the conversation and went to bed, leaving Cheryl with a sinking feeling. The next day, while Cheryl and her daughter Sarah were cleaning up after dinner, the doorbell rang. Sarah scurried to answer it, and Cheryl, peeking from the kitchen, saw her in-laws arriving with Jerry just returning from work. "Why are they here?" Cheryl whispered to Sarah, feeling a mix of surprise and anxiety. "It's okay, Mom. I'll go to my room," Sarah said, dashing off nervously. As Cheryl greeted her in-laws at the door, her father-in-law, Mr. Roy, burst in cheerfully, not waiting for an invitation. He grabbed a beer from the fridge and announced, "We're here to celebrate. You inherited over $500 million. We've even started building a duplex for all of us to live in, complete with your dream kitchen. Be happy, Cheryl." Her mother-in-law added dreamily, "Just imagine a beautiful duplex." Cheryl stood there, overwhelmed not only by the news of her inheritance, but also by their forwardness and the realization that decisions were being made about her life and finances without her consent. The situation was quickly spiraling beyond her control. I found out that Jerry had unilaterally decided to put down half of our savings and some of the money his parents had saved up for a loan, all in his name, but expected it to be covered by my yet-to-be-received inheritance. He beamed with a mix of pride and anticipation as he announced his plans. "I've quit my job and I'm starting a business with your inheritance," he said, as if it was all settled. I was stunned. "Wait a minute, what's going on? I haven't even received any inheritance yet, and you're talking about quitting your job and building a duplex?" "Let's not beat around the bush. It's clear you have an inheritance," Jerry argued, suggesting a celebratory trip to Hawaii amidst the unfolding chaos. As the conversation continued, it became evident that Jerry and my mother-in-law were on the same page, both eerily aligned with Mr. Roy's plans. Jerry, with a tone tinged with condescension, laughed. "You're being miserly, Cheryl. We looked into it because you kept saying you hadn't received the inheritance yet. If you don't claim it within 2 months, you can't refuse it. So, you've definitely inherited, right?" With everyone assuming control over funds I hadn't even claimed, they started making plans for living comfortably off my supposed inheritance. Over $500 million, according to my father-in-law's rough estimate. "Thanks, Mom, and make sure to arrange money for the duplex and my capital," Jerry said, seemingly oblivious to how overwhelming and inappropriate his demands were. Hearing Jerry speak like that left me reeling. I was furious and deeply hurt by their entitlement to my mother's legacy, intended for me, not for their lavish fantasies. Sarah, who was still in the other room, was my main concern as I tried to maintain my composure. Needing to escape, I excused myself. "I'm stepping out for a bit." They hardly noticed, engrossed in their discussion about the inheritance. I left the house and walked to the local hilltop park. The night air was brisk, and as I reached the solitude of the park, tears began to flow. Alone, I cried silently, the cool air mixing with the hot tears streaming down my face as I grappled with feelings of frustration and exploitation. Amidst the turmoil, thoughts of a potential divorce surfaced, but the image of Sarah held me back. My mother's parting words, "Take care of Sarah above all else," echoed in my mind, grounding me in my resolve to protect her happiness and well-being above everything else. As I wept on the hilltop, someone approached me unexpectedly. Startled, I looked up to find a gentle presence whose soft words brought a measure of calm. 5 days after that night, feeling a newfound resolve, I called my husband and in-laws to meet at a restaurant that offered private rooms. As soon as I arrived, Jerry blurted out, "So, you're back home. Did you withdraw the money, Cheryl? You shouldn't just leave without telling your husband." Ignoring their insinuations, I placed a document on the table. It was a filled-out divorce notice. Jerry's face drained of color as he stammered, "What? What's this?" "I want a divorce," I said calmly but firmly, cutting through the tension. Jerry's panic was evident, and my in-laws exchanged anxious looks. "You can't just leave us like this," Jerry exclaimed. "Ever since you inherited from your mom, you've become so greedy," he accused. I looked them straight in the eyes. "Ever since I inherited, you've been out of control, quitting jobs, planning to live off my money, using my savings to fund my dreams, and now planning extravagant trips without consulting me. Tell me, who really changed when the money came into the picture?" "You can't just divorce me out of nowhere," Jerry argued, his tone desperate. "Half of everything is mine, including our savings and half of the inheritance." As they pressed in with their demands, the door suddenly opened. Sarah and attorney Mr. Roy entered, bringing a sudden hush over the room. "Dad, Grandpa, Grandma, you should know better," Sarah said with a maturity beyond her years. "Mom's inheritance isn't shared property, right, Mr. Roy?" Mr. Roy nodded, stepping forward. "I'm attorney Mr. Roy, and Cheryl's mom entrusted me with her legal matters." "I've been advising Cheryl," he stated formally, leaving Jerry flustered. "Indeed," Mr. Roy continued, "inherited property isn't shared. It's not subject to division. "What? That can't be right. Is this a mistake?" Jerry stuttered, confusion written all over his face. Their reactions confirmed their deep-seated belief that they were entitled to my inheritance. This misunderstanding, this entitlement, was all the more reason for me to pursue the divorce. I needed to protect not only my future, but also Sarah's, ensuring our lives were free from this toxic sense of entitlement. "I'll stick by you no matter what," my husband shouted, his eyes bloodshot, his voice disregarding the gravity of the situation. "Stop it," Sarah intervened calmly, a quiet strength in her voice that cut through the tension. "Ever since Mom inherited, Dad hasn't thought about her once. Grandpa only cares about the money. They never even mention me. I can't see them as a family anymore." Jerry and my in-laws were visibly shocked by Sarah's words. When the inheritance issue had first upset me, Sarah had been the one to comfort me, saying, "Dad, Grandpa, and Grandma are wrong. They're trying to take Grandma's legacy. Mom, I'm with you. Let's face this together." Bolstered by her support, I contacted Mr. Roy, our attorney, to arrange this very meeting. Sarah's declaration seemed to strike a chord, but Jerry attempted to sway her. "That's not true, Sarah. Dad wants what's best for you. Wouldn't you be happier with us?" My in-laws chimed in, "Children shouldn't interfere." With a look of resolute frustration, Sarah responded, "I'm going with Mom. I can't stay with you anymore." And she turned away decisively. "We've made our decision. Sarah and I will leave," I stated calmly, which only fueled Jerry's anger. "I've never cheated, and you can't force a divorce. I'll get a lawyer. We'll get that money," he threatened, his desperation palpable. "I'll handle it from here," Mr. Roy intervened quietly, his tone steady and reassuring. "The crux here is whether there are serious grounds for ending the marriage, quitting his job, using our savings without consent, making decisions unilaterally, and Sarah's expressed distress. These are multiple arguments to support our case. Additionally, your daughter has recorded evidence of all of you pressuring Cheryl for her inheritance. That should serve as compelling evidence." Jerry slumped, defeated, and my in-laws' faces went pale. After that, Sarah and I left the restaurant, our path forward clear. A year later, thanks to Mr. Roy's diligent efforts, my divorce from Jerry was finalized. Sarah and I moved into my mother's old house, finding peace and a fresh start, far from the conflicts and the greed that had marred the previous years. The strength and clarity that Sarah showed that day in the restaurant had set us on this new path, one that we walked together, strengthened by each other's resolve. Despite our fresh start, remnants of the past continued to surface, complicating our peace. Jerry sent numerous letters, each one a plea for reconciliation. More disconcertingly, he was seen near Sarah's school, an act that felt too close for comfort. Concerned for our safety and privacy, we sought legal measures. With the steadfast help of Mr. Roy, our attorney, we managed to secure a restraining order against Jerry. This decisive action helped dampen the unwanted intrusions and restored a measure of peace in our lives. In our challenges, we heard through the grapevine that Jerry and my in-laws had proceeded with their plans and built the duplex they had envisioned. Yet life in their new home was not as idyllic as they had hoped. My in-laws, previously retired, found themselves compelled to rejoin the workforce, taking up positions at a local factory to make ends meet. Jerry, despite his earlier schemes for a comfortable life funded by my inheritance, ended up undertaking manual labor. Neighbors whispered that the walls of the duplex often echoed with the sounds of constant arguments, making the family somewhat unpopular in their new community. Meanwhile, Sarah and I continued to forge a serene existence away from the tumult of my former family ties. Our home was a sanctuary of peace and mutual support. Recently, Sarah's aspirations reached across oceans. She expressed a strong desire to study abroad in the homeland of my mother, a place I held dear in my heart. This idea struck a chord with both of us, as it presented a chance to completely sever the lingering ties with Jerry and his intrusive attempts at reconciliation. Motivated by Sarah's dreams and our shared longing for a fresh start, we decided to move overseas. We used a portion of my mother's inheritance to facilitate this new chapter in our lives, a decision I believe my mother would have wholeheartedly supported. Sarah adapted wonderfully to her new school, thriving academically and socially in a way that filled me with immense pride. I, too, found fulfillment in securing a position as a teacher in our new home, embracing the opportunity to shape young minds while also rebuilding our lives. As we settled into our routine in this new country, the tranquility and stability we experienced were profound. Each peaceful day reinforced our decision to leave behind the past and embrace the future. With hope in our hearts, we look forward to continuing our journey in this new land, confident in the support we have for each other and optimistic about what the future holds.